What are we talking about today?
Hello everybody and welcome to the What Are We Talking About podcast. I am your host Cody McLean. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful Saturday afternoon. Well, I guess it's approaching evening now, with it being 5:47 right now. But yeah, so there's a few different things I want to talk about. First things first. First thing I want to talk about is I'm going to discuss my thoughts on basically all the X-Men movies leading up to X-Men Apocalypse, but in a different way. I'm just going to rank them in the order that I think from worst to best, or best to worst kind of a thing, right? And then I am going to give you my thoughts on X-Men Apocalypse because I saw it on Thursday, so I'll be able to give you guys my thoughts, and I'd like to know your guys' thoughts. You just either hit me up in the comments, tweet at me at Winter Trooper or at What We Talkin', and then you could even email us at whatwetalkingabouttoday@gmail.com. So first things first, the number one worst of the X-Men movies so far, and hopefully ever, is, I'm sure you guys will have the same one, X-Men Origins Wolverine. Now, when this movie first came out, it had a bit of a Phantom Menace effect on me, where I didn't know much about Deadpool when this movie came out. I hadn't read much of his comics. So the whole Deadpool thing didn't mean anything to me because I didn't know really who Deadpool was. But then, like, I could tell that it wasn't a great movie, but I still liked it because I just thought Wolverine was the best character. I still think he's a really great character. But this is a movie where the more you watch it, the more it becomes unwatchable. And one thing that I do gotta say about this movie that's a definite positive is in the opening, like the opening scene and all of the stuff where it starts out in the past or whatever with young Wolverine. That part's not bad. And it's quite like the comics, other than Sabretooth being his brother. That's not in the comics. But then the whole part where it shows them, like, it's like the time montage through all the wars. Amazing. One of the best sequences in all of X-Men. The only thing that could have possibly made it better would be a cameo by Captain America when they were in World War II. But, you know, Marvel and Fox rights, you can't really do that right now. But the next, like, it's basically, I still enjoy the first 10-20 minutes up until basically Wolverine quits. Like that whole scene where it's got Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson, like before he's Deadpool. That was awesome. That's exactly the characterization of Deadpool that people would want. Like I said, I didn't know much about Deadpool when I originally saw the movie, but the farther in, like, the more that I learned about Deadpool, then that part was the part I liked, and then the other parts was the part I didn't like. Because originally, the first time I saw it, I was like, wow, Deadpool's this amazing character with fucking all these insane powers, and he's got, like, katanas in his arms and stuff like that. It was crazy. But I know now how Deadpool actually is, and he's way better than that shitty version of him in this movie. And I'm so glad that we have a good version of Deadpool to look at now and to watch his movie. But overall for me, this is definitely the weakest of the X-Men films. And I mean, some people might disagree with and say that their worst is my second worst, my number 8 X-Men film, X-Men 3: The Last Stand. And for a long time, it seemed like, you know, well, not a long time, but enough of time, it seemed like X-Men might be done because of this movie. It was so poorly received. And then the next one that came out was X-Men Origins Wolverine, which was supposed to be almost a reboot style. They were going to do a bunch of origin movies. X-Men Origins Wolverine, X-Men Origins Magneto was the second one. But then because X-Men Origins Wolverine was so poor and so poorly received, it basically they scrapped the idea for the Magneto Origins movie, and they took some of that and put it into First Class. But we wouldn't have needed that if this movie hadn't been so bad. They screwed up some amazing fucking storylines. 2 huge storylines that could have been used separate. They shouldn't have combined these 2 stories. They combined the story of the mutant cure along with the Dark Phoenix saga, and they did it in such a poor way that it's easily the worst. Of the original 3, I mean, X-Men Origins Wolverine is far worse. At least this has good CGI in it and stuff like that. Like, it's not a great movie, but at least, yeah, the CGI is good. Juggernaut, I don't understand why the fuck Juggernaut is just what's-his-face in a goddamn, like, rubber muscle suit. He looks ridiculous. I don't know what that's all about, but hey, whatever. I guess that's what they thought they should do. But, yeah, so, I don't know, there's X3... When you rewatch it today, I know it's so bad, but there is some good parts. The opening scene where it shows the young mutants, what's his name? I want to say Cyclops, but it's not Cyclops. It's Colossus and Iceman and Shadowcat and all that stuff, and they're training under the helm of, I think, Jean Grey, Storm, and Wolverine. Wolverine's kind of sitting in because he's not normally an instructor because Scott... That's right, Jean Grey's dead. So Scott is lost and sad. So Wolverine and Storm are the ones training the kids. And that is a cool sequence. And it's the first time we ever saw the Danger Room on screen, which was really cool to see. But then it just became weird and convoluted. What's his name? Nightcrawler is nowhere to be seen. Like, he was possibly the best part of X2, and now he's just nowhere. Nightcrawler was to X2 what Quicksilver was to Days of Future Past, where it was like, this dude had... His introduction sequence was unbelievable. Nightcrawler's like but I'll talk about that later. But anyways, X3, I can't believe there's no Nightcrawler, no explanation as to what happened to him. Now, yeah, I don't know. There's just a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense. Phoenix's powers are weird. She disintegrates Professor X, and then at the end of the movie, in the after credits scene, he is in the body of that dude who didn't have a mind. I don't know. It's really weird and convoluted, and overall, it's just upsetting because 1 and 2 were so good that when it gets to the third one and it's so not good, it's just a disappointment, and that's all you can really say about it. Like, if Bryan Singer wouldn't have left to go do Superman Returns, who knows what the X-Men universe could look like right now. Maybe there wouldn't be this young cast. We would still have the original cast. Who knows? But overall, it's my second to worst. What did you guys think of X-Men Origins Wolverine and X-Men The Last Stand? Do you dislike them as much as I do? Those are definitely the ones that I dislike. All the other X-Men movies I at least enjoy watching. Like, the good outweighs the bad in all the other ones. And my next on the list, my number 7, is The Wolverine. It's the second in the Wolverine trilogy, if you want to call it that. I mean, it's not exactly a trilogy. The Wolverine is more of a sequel to the original X-Men trilogy in a way, because it's Wolverine dealing with the loss of Jean Grey, basically, after X3, where he had to kill Jean Grey, and she haunts him, basically, and then he gets a message from a guy that he saved in World War II in Japan when the bombs dropped. The guy now wants Wolverine to come there, and he wants to... The way that he makes it seem is that he's gonna be a good dude, and he's gonna help Wolverine's... Like, literally, part of Wolverine's problem is that he can't die. Like, it's a good thing and a bad thing, because it's a good thing because who doesn't want to live forever? But it's also a bad thing because when you live forever, everyone you love dies while you keep living. So you have to basically either figure out a way to not be attached to people, or you're gonna go mad. That's kind of what this movie is about. He's trying to become detached from Jean Grey, but he's also he doesn't want to let go. And I think that it's a really, really interesting Wolverine movie, and I like it quite a bit. My only issue is at the end, it kind of devolves into this weird, like, it almost felt like the studio was like, okay, it's all good, but people aren't gonna like it because it doesn't feel like an X-Men movie. I don't know what they were thinking, but I like the dark, gritty style that they were going with for most of it, until the very end, when all of a sudden now there's like a giant adamantium robot in the shape of a samurai, and there's a chick in green makeup and like a weird green costume that totally was out of place, didn't fit with the rest of the movie at all. Yeah, I don't know. The ending was the only part of that movie. Like, if it weren't for that very end sequence, and by the way, the extended version, the unrated extended version, is like night and day difference, way better than the original theatrical version, because there's an entire like 5 to 7 minute sequence of Wolverine fighting ninjas that they completely cut out of the theatrical version, and it adds a lot to the movie. But anyways, yeah, that end sequence definitely takes away from the movie, and if it weren't for that, it would be much higher on the list if it weren't for that ending sequence. But overall, yeah, like I said, I like it, but it's still the worst of the ones that I like, probably. And it's mostly just because of that ending. Like I said, I like most of the movie, but that ending just kills it. But yeah, on to what did you guys think of the Wolverine? Do you think that I'm wrong? Do you think the ending is better than, and I'm just not giving it enough credit? I'd like to know your guys' thoughts. Next movie on my list, number 6. A lot of people will have this higher on their list, but it's hard because from here on up, all of the movies are really good, and it's the same when you're dealing with ranking, say, the Star Wars movies or the Marvel movies. There's so many good ones that you have to have movies that you love at a really low place on your list, because the other ones you just love more. So my next number 6 for me is X-Men First Class. Now, this is the movie with, like I said a little bit earlier, part of the plot and idea for this movie was originally going to be a Magneto Origins movie, the follow-up to the Wolverine Origins movie, but that idea, like I said, was scrapped, and they evolved it into this X-Men First Class, helmed by Matthew Vaughn, same guy who directed Kick-Ass and Kingsman. And I gotta say, the first time I watched the movie, I didn't like it. There was parts that I liked, Magneto, Professor X, but there was parts that I didn't like. I didn't like the montage of them learning how to use their powers. I didn't like most of the sequences with, I didn't like Jennifer Lawrence's Mystique. Most of the sequences with those young mutants I didn't like, and it just seemed like crappy teen drama. And like when Mystique was like, we gave everybody nicknames. You're Professor X and you're Magneto, and it's like, it felt weird to me the first time I watched it, because I was much more used to the grittier, darker X-Men universe that we had seen, and the one that's been based in the near future, X-Men 1, 2, and 3, whereas X-Men First Class is in the 60s, and it's a little more campy, and in a way, it took away from it for me the first couple times I watched it, and I didn't like it as much. But the farther that I went and the more that I watched it, the more I ended up liking this movie. Overall, I still don't enjoy that montage with the training, but I like it a little bit better. There's parts of it I like. I do like Professor X helping Magneto unlock his powers, and it's almost a Star Wars-esque moment where he's saying, like, let go of your hate because there's power in love, right? And it's almost a Harry Potter, Star Wars moment that like on a repeat viewing, it means a lot more, especially after having seen Days of Future Past and the progression of the relationship. To go back and see again where it started it's really powerful, and that part is one of the best parts. And the relationship between Professor X and Magneto, starting in First Class, it adds so much depth, because in the original trilogy of X-Men movies, we always heard that Professor X and Magneto used to be friends or have a history, and they definitely have a mutual respect where they don't hate each other even though they have opposing ideologies. Like in X2, they're sitting there playing chess with each other and all that stuff. So seeing where their relationship started was incredibly interesting for me, and I think it adds so much to the universe, and it retroactively makes the original trilogy better, knowing where these guys started. And like, I don't know, based on the comics, if that's how Professor X became paralyzed or whatever, but that also adds to the strain on the relationship. And not only that, I didn't personally like Raven Mystique's origin in this movie. I personally don't think she should be called Mystique in First Class, Days of Future Past, or X-Men Apocalypse, especially not X-Men Apocalypse. The only one of those that she could maybe be called Mystique is X-Men Days of Future Past, because she doesn't act like Mystique in any of the other movies, especially not First Class. She's nothing like Mystique in First Class. By the end of the movie, she is about being mutant and proud, which that's closer to being Mystique. So then Days of Future Past, it seems like that she was getting closer again. But yeah, I don't know. I'm getting off track. Basically, I really like First Class. I don't like that Jennifer Lawrence is Mystique, because what's happening is they're basically making it so that Mystique has to be a main character and has to be the center of the X-Men, because it's Jennifer Lawrence and people love her, I guess. I personally wish that wasn't the case, but overall, it doesn't detract enough from the movie to get it any lower on my list. I definitely enjoy the movie. And one thing that's really cool is Moira McTaggart in this movie kicks ass, and she's a cool spy, like badass spy chick. And I like the relationship between her and Professor X. It's really well done. And yeah, I don't know, like, overall, like I said, I don't love the movie, but I really, really like it, and the more that I watch it, kind of the more I like it, especially now after, like I said, the first time I watched this movie, I didn't like it for a couple of reasons, like I already mentioned, and then some more reasons, which include, one, like I said before, Wolverine was my favorite character, and I didn't like that Wolverine wasn't in the movie, but what an amazing cameo, best cameo in any movie ever. And I didn't like the fact that, yeah, like, I don't know, I didn't like the way that everything, that it was in the 60s, and that it was it just changed what I knew about some continuity and stuff like that, and so that part I didn't like. But now it's gotten to the point where X-Men movies clearly don't care about continuity. But overall, like I said, First Class is my number 6 on my list. I really, really like it, but I just don't quite love it. But it is a really good movie, and if you haven't seen First Class yet, what are you doing? Get out there and see this movie. I think it might be on Netflix. But anyways, let me know what your thoughts are on First Class, if you have seen it, in the comments below. Or whatever, you can, like I said, again, you can tweet or email us, whatever. My next number on my list, now we're getting to the top 5. Number 5, the original X-Men. Now, some of you might have this higher, might have this lower. For me, it's number 5. The next 4, I just think that they're a little bit better. X-Men 1, though, to me, it's what's started, like, before X1, there wasn't really good comic book movies. I mean, there was the Batman 89, Batman Returns. I personally like them, but some people don't like them as much. Blade, you could say, is pretty good, but this is the first time we really had, and this is definitely the first time way before Avengers, like, what is it, like 10, 12 years before Avengers, a superhero team-up movie. X-Men's been doing it for how long that now it's gotten to the point where people are spoiled and they're like, oh, I mean, it's not the best X-Men movie, but it was still an amazing movie. And X-Men 1 was the first one to do it. It did such an amazing job introducing so many characters. We had Wolverine, perfect casting with Hugh Jackman, even though he's not what you think of classically. He's a lot taller and leaner than the original Wolverine is from the comics. Professor X, like, what a perfect casting. Magneto, perfect casting. Mystique, perfect casting. Somebody that she was perfect as Mystique. Like, I'll say it, this is some of the best Mystique we've had. X-Men 1 and X-Men 2 is the best Mystique we've had, period. Better than any of the other fucking 8 or 7 movies or whatever. Easily, X-Men 1 and X-Men 2 is the best Mystique. The plot of X-Men 1 is, for me, what keeps it a little bit lower on the list. And the thing is, considering when this movie came out, you could put it a little bit higher because you could give it a little more credit. Because it was fucking amazing for the time, like, revolutionary, not only in terms of changing what we thought about comic book movies, but also, like I said a bit ago, it's the first superhero team-up movie that we've really seen. So you can give it a little bit of leeway on the plot. And personally, I didn't like necessarily the characterization of Rogue so much. They almost made it an amalgam of Rogue / Jubilee / Rogue from the Ultimates, or whatever it's called. Not the Ultimates, but yeah, maybe it's the Ultimates from the 90s. There was a cartoon where the first episode was basically the beginning of X-Men 1, where Rogue goes to kiss her boyfriend and accidentally steals most of his life force, and then he goes into a coma or something like that, and then she runs away from home and ends up going to the X-Mansion. But I did really like the way that, and like the relationship between Wolverine and Rogue was really cool, and just the way that the movie it changed what we, like I said, it changed what we thought about superhero movies, and it deserves a lot of respect in terms of the genre of superhero movies, comic book movies, because it literally was the one, it was the beginning, starting there, and then we had also Spider-Man, and then X2, and it's like, that's some really good fucking movies in a row. So lots of props to X-Men 1, and that's why it's my number 5 on the list. Where does it rank on your list? And let me know what you think of the movie. Yeah, I mean, there's some other stuff that you could talk about. Sabretooth, which Sabretooth, I don't know if he showed up in any of the other X-Men movies until we got at Wolverine Origins. I don't quite remember if he was in X2 or X3. I don't think he was. But yeah, I really like that movie. It's my number 5. Like I said, let me know your thoughts, comments, tweets, emails, whatevers. Now, on to my number 4. It is the most recent of the X-Men movies. It is X-Men Apocalypse. It is in theaters right now. And I personally really, really like this movie. I mean, it's gotten some mixed reviews, but I really like it. I think that I might get some flack for this, saying that it's better than First Class and X-Men 1. But that's what I think, in my opinion. It might be a little bit weaker in some spots, and I don't want to go into too much quite yet. I'll do my full review after I'm done ranking them, but overall, it's a solid movie, and it's one of the better X-Men movies, in my opinion. So I'll go more into that in a bit, but if you've seen the movie, go ahead and let me know your thoughts right now in the comments. It don't matter when you do it, because I will have already recorded this. So, bingo bango, give me your list. Anyways, that was a little bit short and sweet, but like I said, I'll give you more thoughts on that in a bit. My number 3, top 3, also a movie from this year, Deadpool. What an amazing movie. Like, this is the first time we've had a comic book character done so poorly in such a mainstream movie, and then brought back using the same actor and done so perfectly the second time, like, you wouldn't think that that they had anything to do with each other. It's the same actor. And Deadpool in the Deadpool movie is possibly the best characterization of a comic book character we've seen in the history of comic book movies. It's really hard to say. I mean, Black Panther and Civil War and Spider-Man and Civil War were incredibly well done. But yeah, Deadpool in the Deadpool movie. Now, this might not rank as high on some other people's lists for the simple fact of maybe it's not as high of a budget, and you can see that in some of the CGI in a couple of the scenes. It's not as much of it's not an X-Men movie, even though there's some X-Men in it. It's more of a comedy than I think really any of the other superhero movies. Like, it could be classified as a comedy, but that all those things play into who Deadpool is, and those, like, they're fine. It makes it so that I'm, like, because of who Deadpool is, it makes it so I'm fine with some of the other stuff, and they did such a good job with the characterization, the story, the relationships between the characters in the movie. All of the actors were really good. Like, I mean, it was generic British bad guy, but they even poked fun at that in the opening credits. Like, it's just such a well-done movie, and it's so perfectly timed, where the only thing that could have made it better is if they would have switched the release dates of Deadpool and X-Men Apocalypse, because I'm worried that X-Men Apocalypse might suffer from a little bit of team fatigue, big superhero movie fatigue, because Batman v Superman, Civil War, and X-Men Apocalypse all have something in common, and that is heroes fighting heroes, right? We have Storm, Angel, Magneto could be, depending on what version, anti-hero or whatever, villain, all as the Four Horsemen fighting against the X-Men team. Then we have Civil War, Iron Man versus Cap. Batman v Superman is, of course, Batman v Superman. So I could see that if that would have come out first, I think it would be getting a lot better reviews. Plus, I think if X-Men Apocalypse would be getting better reviews if it had come out before Civil War, because Civil War was so good. And then Deadpool coming out, if it had come out now, it would be such the perfect anti-comic book movie. It's the perfect anti-comic book movie where it takes those comic book movie tropes and it plays off of them so well, and it does it in such a sarcastic way that it's awesome to watch, and it's so refreshing to see this type of take on a comic book movie. And it's so well done in terms of who Deadpool is as a character, the characterization of him, and not only that, but they nailed Colossus for the first time. Like, from what we've seen of Colossus in the movies before, he's not the Colossus from the comics. He's an adaptation, and that's fine for what they were doing, but this was the best Colossus we've seen, and it's exactly what I remember, at least from the 80s or the 90s cartoon that I used to watch when I was a kid. Now, let me know what your thoughts of Deadpool is in the comments. Do you love it as much as I do? And like I said before about how I didn't know much about Deadpool, when I was in high school, after X-Men Origins Wolverine had come out, I became friends with somebody who was an avid comic book reader, and he introduced me to the character of Deadpool. And I just basically fell in love with the character, and he's one of my favorite characters because one of the reasons why I love Wolverine so much is his power, the healing factor and all that stuff. Deadpool has just as awesome of a healing factor, plus he's fucking hilarious. And I love the fact that he knows that he's a comic book character and all that cool stuff. So by the time the Deadpool movie actually came out, which I didn't ever think would happen after X-Men Origins Wolverine, I have read enough of Deadpool comics to know enough about the character that movie was just, it's one of my favorites because I love the character so much. So that also is part of the reason why it's so high on my list. But like I said, it's my number 3. where does it rank on your list? My number 2, X2. The best Wolverine movie we've had so far. The scene in the kitchen and the X-Mansion where the soldiers, like the Strikers team of soldiers, are coming in and trying to extract some children, some mutants, and Wolverine takes out a bunch of the soldiers. Like, first of all, that was the first time we saw Colossus on screen, which, yeah, the one in Deadpool was the better Colossus, but seeing it on screen for the first time was so awesome. And then we got Wolverine in the most badass we've seen of him. Way better Wolverine Origins movie than the actual Wolverine Origins movie. We learned just as much, I think, about his origin, except for where his leather jacket came from. And it's a way better movie. Stryker in this movie is fucking awesome. We got Lady Deathstrike, Magneto in a fucking plastic prison. Like, there's so much to love about this movie. It's hard to think that it's not number 1. I'm sure you know what my number 1 is now, but a little more about X2 before I move on is that, yeah, this movie, besides being the best Wolverine movie, it also gives you the hope and, like, the end where it shows Jean Grey sacrificing herself, and then you see the Phoenix coming in the water. The promises that gave us was better than anything we could have imagined. Like, forget the fact that Brett Ratner fucked up the Phoenix saga in the next movie. Just the idea that we were going to get it was just amazing, and the fact that Bryan Singer set that up was so perfect. Everything about this movie is awesome, and everything about it still holds up to this day. And there's even an homage to this movie a little bit in X-Men Apocalypse. But it's just the Nightcrawler stuff in X2. Not only just the intro scene where he's going through the White House, that's one of the best scenes in a comic book movie, period. It rivals the Quicksilver scene, in my opinion, from Days of Future Past. But just the way that they portrayed Nightcrawler as this dark, he's like torn, and he's been forced to do bad things, and he's this hardcore Catholic that he has basically carved symbols into himself for every sin, and he's just such an interesting and intriguing and complex character that Bryan Singer did such an incredible job of bringing to the screen, and Alan Cumming portraying Nightcrawler. It was so amazing, and I'm glad that they brought him back in this latest X-Men movie. I can't go on much more other than just, it's amazing. And if you haven't seen X-Men 2, watch it, because that's the thing. It's my number 2 on my list, but some days I feel like it could be my number 1. That's how much I love the movie, and that's how good the movie is. It really is the best of the original X-Men trilogy, and possibly the best of all the X-Men movies. But the one that I have ranked number 1 today that's just barely beats it out, I'm sure you've guessed it, X-Men Days of Future Past. Now, this is a movie that, it's unprecedented, and it's unlike, it's almost like The Force Awakens, but even better, in the sense that we got the old characters, we got the new characters interacting with each other, but also the reason why it's maybe even a little bit better is because we got that same thing in The Force Awakens, but they didn't have to really introduce those characters in The Force Awakens, in Days of Future Past like they did in The Force Awakens. We already met most of those characters in X-Men First Class, making it so that they had more time to spend on the actual story of Days of Future Past. And that's the one thing that second movies in a trilogy the benefit that they have is that you already are invested in this universe, and now you can just tell an amazing story. You don't have to tell any origins. You don't have to do anything like that. You just tell an amazing story, and that's what Days of Future Past did. And it doesn't matter if you're not a comic book fan, you can still love this movie because it's not just a great comic book movie. It's just a great movie. And like some of the great things, besides just the amazing fucking scene with Quicksilver, I've said this a few times, but X-Men is a franchise that has some of the most amazing sequences of any movies. The Quicksilver scene where they're in the Pentagon, I think it's the Pentagon, yeah. And everybody goes to shoot Magneto and stuff. And he goes and he fucking like moves all the bullets and he fucks up all the guards. One of the best scenes in movie history. Amazing to look at, amazing to watch. One of the best movies for 3D of all time. Just amazing, and the best characterization we've seen of Quicksilver. X-Men Apocalypse won me over even more. I mean, I like the Quicksilver we saw in X-Men Apocalypse or Avengers Age of Ultron for some slightly different reasons. Like, I like the fact that, like, this Quicksilver in X-Men is so overpowered that it's hard to beat him at all, basically. Like, if he would have went with them on this mission, they would have had no troubles with doing any, like, everything would have been fine. Like, he's just so fast that nothing can basically stop him. Whereas the other Quicksilver, he actually gets tired and stuff like that. We've never seen this Quicksilver get tired. But the actual character, who he is, what he says, what he does, way more of a fun character. One of the best characters in the X-Men movies that we've had. Overall, I love Quicksilver, and I am already a little bit prone to liking speedster characters. It's one of my favorite powers. But yeah, overall, Days of Future Past is just a fucking amazingly good movie. Peter Dinklage is Bolivar Trask. This is the one where we saw Jennifer Lawrence actually being Mystique. Like, there's scenes in this movie where she is Mystique, the Mystique that I know from not the comics, but the previous X-Men movies, which we didn't get to see in the X-Men First Class, and we don't see it in X-Men Apocalypse, which upsets me. That's one of the negatives that I have about that movie. But X-Men Days of Future Past, it's one of the most amazing things, and it's hard to see anything ever being better than it, for the simple fact of we'll never get a movie like that again, where it's a quasi-semi-sequel to two different franchises, or two different, like, it's the original cast and it's the new cast, and it's just this amazing piece of cinema that is so rare and unique that I don't think we'll ever really see anything like it again. And, I mean, maybe, but it's hard to imagine. I just think it's so well done, and the scenes in the future are so fucking amazing. Watching some of the coolest and your favorite X-Men characters, Bobby and fucking Magneto, get killed, even though they come back to life later. It's tragic, it's heartbreaking, and it's done so well. Even though you know nothing's gonna happen, they did such a good job of this movie that you feel like, while you're watching it, you're like, holy fuck, what if they don't succeed? And it's just so well done overall. Suspense, the whole movie, it's just incredible, and it's easily the #1 X-Men movie. Like I said, some days I feel like X2 might be better, but I think it's Days of Future Past all day. But anyways, that's my list. That's my rankings for the X-Men movies. I'm curious to know, what are your guys' rankings? Am I crazy? Do I have this list all wrong? I want to know. What are you guys? How do you rank the movies? Yeah, overall, let me know what your list is, either in the comments, or you can, like I said, hit me up on Twitter or fucking email. But now, on to the more juicy subject of my thoughts on X-Men Apocalypse. I just brushed over it while I was giving my rankings. Wow. X-Men First Class trilogy of X-Men movies is one of the best trilogies of movies, in my opinion, that we've had. X-Men Apocalypse, I will say that I like it better than First Class, but not as much as Days of Future Past. There's so much of this movie that is amazing that the few things that I have problems with the movie are completely outweighed by the good. So a couple negatives that I have is Psylocke was, first of all, her costume, like, yeah, it's accurate to the comics, but it's stuck out like crazy, seeing as how Apocalypse gave Magneto, Angel, and Storm all these amazing armor sets, and then Psylocke is wearing a one-piece fucking bikini with like a red sash around her waist. Yeah, I know it's accurate to the comics and all that, but sometimes you don't want to be accurate to the comics. Like, it's better to just make a good movie than it is to be accurate to the source material. One other thing, there was something else that I had as a negative. If I think of it, I'll say it, but some of the positives were the way that they introduced the Young Mutants, Nightcrawler, Jean Grey, Cyclops. This is the best Cyclops we've seen from an X-Men movie. Easily the best Cyclops. Jean Grey was the weakest of the three, but again, that's like saying fucking X-Men First Class is the weakest of these three movies. They're still all amazing. Oh, that was amazing. But anyways, so yeah, X-Men that were introduced were awesome. The X-Men that they brought back, which included Quicksilver, he had a scene in this movie that it wasn't as big of a surprise because we expected it, like it was talked about beforehand and all that stuff. Plus, I'm gonna go into some spoilers, so I'll just tell you now. Overall, you heard where I rank this movie, so if you don't want to hear any spoilers, shut it off now. Here we go. It starts with when that bee goes into slow motion, and it's like, okay, here we go. And then that's such an amazing scene of Quicksilver saving all those mutants. If it weren't for Quicksilver, there would be no more X-Men movies, basically. Like, he saved all of the people other than Havoc from that explosion. And it was an incredible feat of not only heroism, but an incredible feat of his power, showing of his powers. Excuse me. The introduction to the movie with Magneto and his family, Logan called that. That's exactly what he said would happen. I kind of tended to agree with him, but yeah, he totally called that. Where Magneto, the first little bit is Magneto just hanging out with his family, and then you get attached, and then they get killed, and it's like, wow, you guys are gonna die. That you can't kill his wife and kid and expect to live. I know it was an accident, but my God, wow. There was some moments in this movie that were just unbelievable, and that was one of them. And it makes sense as to why, like, Magneto's one of those characters where it's like, in the trailers, it's like, I don't want him to be mind controlled. Why is it that he's going to be with Apocalypse? And I think that they did a good job of showing why he would be with. I think all of his horsemen, it makes sense why they went with Apocalypse. And the two that I was most concerned about was Storm and Magneto, and they did a good job of. I mean, they didn't necessarily use all of those horsemen to their fullest effect, but overall, their motivations were clear. And that's something that I'm really happy about. Magneto's was, of course, his family's death, and that was his final straw where he's like, I guess all I am is a fucking killing machine. That's what God wants from me, that's what I'll do. So he joins Apocalypse. Storm was basically, she was lost in the world, and she was looking for somebody to follow, and Apocalypse basically tricked her. He kind of tricked her into becoming on her team, because as soon as she saw the tragedy that he was inflicting on the world in the final sequence, she swapped over to being on the X-Men's team because she is truly good at heart, and that was something that was good. She could have been used more, but when you have a movie with so many characters, it's hard. Like, this movie could have been another hour in length, and I would have been fine with it, I think. Psylocke was wasted, but at least her motivation was clear. She clearly is about strength and power, and fucking Apocalypse was like, I can make you more powerful. So she went with it. It made sense. Angel, he was the one that it made the most sense. He was just a drunk, and his wing was all fucked up. So he was like, yeah, I'll go with you. You made me more badass. He was just a drunk, like, 80s grunge metal. I don't even know if there was really grunge in the 80s, but yeah, it kind of made sense, right? And he's the one where you're the most likely to when you think of Apocalypse, you think of Angel / Archangel, right? And so all four of them, some of them might have been a little bit underused, but overall you got why they did what they did. And then with the New Mutants, I'm so glad Jubilee was barely in this movie. People might hate me for this, but I hated her in the animated series. I think she has such a dumb power, and she's such an annoying character. She was fine in the movie, don't get me wrong. I like this version of Jubilee better than the version in the cartoon from the 90s. But I think she was used a perfect amount. I can't wait to see the Blu-ray where they show them actually going to the mall, and more than them just, going to Return of the Jedi, because that's all they did in the movie. They just say they're going to the mall, and then they just end up going to Return of the Jedi. That's it. But I did like the joke that Sophie Turner threw in about how the third one is always the worst one, doing a little bit of a crack on possibly this movie, because some people will think that this is the worst of the new trilogy, but mostly it was a crack on X-Men 3. And I think that she is kind of right. I mean, depends. Everybody has their own opinion on the Star Wars trilogy, but for me, they're all pretty much equal, but 6 is a little bit below. Like, for me, it goes 4 is number 1, 5 is number 2, 6 is number 3. But again, that's something that changes day to day. But I did like that joke, and I liked that reference. What else was there? Oh, the Scott Summers / I forget what his brother's name is, but Havoc, their relationship, and that was tragic, and I totally did not see that coming. But thinking back, it makes sense. You see Havoc, that Havoc is in the movie, but then you don't see him in any of the end battles or any of that stuff, so it makes sense. Like, looking back on the trailers and stuff, could have saw this coming, but it shocked me. And it was a tragic thing that it added weight to the movie. Like, sometimes they say, like, a movie like this it doesn't feel like there's stakes unless somebody dies. And I mean, as much as I would have loved to see Jennifer Lawrence no longer be Mystique, they can't kill off Mystique. They can't kill off, there's so many characters they can't kill off. Havoc was kind of the one they had to. And I don't know, I did really, really love this movie. But a couple of gripes. The ending could have been better. Like, I mean, I liked it, but I can understand how there's some criticism. One thing I really liked was how when Apocalypse basically taught Magneto the full extent of his power, I thought that was really cool, because at first I thought it was weird. What, he's going to be able to use his magnetism on just dirt? But then when it showed the actual magnetic arcs of the electromagnetic field, that he was basically amplifying the Earth's magnetic field. Like, that's unbelievable. And I just watched the game theory, or not game theory, I guess it would be film theory, that MatPat just put up here, I guess it would have been a couple days ago now, about Magneto's powers. And I guess there was something he said, basically, it's like, his magnetic power is equivalent to that of a supernova or something like that. And so they did a really good job of displaying how powerful he is in this movie, where Apocalypse didn't even amplify his powers, and he basically was still able to increase the magnetic field of the Earth to such a degree that it was causing mass destruction. And it was really good. One thing that was kind of shitty was Moira McTaggart in this movie was underused, and she felt a little, not out of place, but it felt weird. She felt almost like a bumbling damsel for a lot of the movie because she didn't have any memories of that stuff. And she accidentally helped Apocalypse get brought back. I don't know. I just felt like she was not used very well, and that I liked her so much in First Class. I was excited to see her return, and they kind of screwed the pooch with it. I think that they could have done a lot better. But again, it's one of those things where it's like, it's the same troubles Joss Whedon had with Avengers 2. Like, when you have so many characters in a movie, it's hard to give them all the amount of screen time because everybody has a different favorite, right? If this wasn't an X-Men movie and this was just a movie and we didn't know who any of the characters were beforehand, this movie people would have liked it more, I think, because you don't have any preconceived notions as to what you expect Storm to do or how you expect them to use Moira in the movie, Moira the Explorer. You have expectations going in, so when they don't do those things, it can cause like anger even. And in a way, like I said before, we're a little bit spoiled because we've had such amazing movies. If this movie came out in fucking 2004 or whatever, like even 5 years ago, it would be way better received. But because we've had Days of Future Past, because we've had Civil War and Winter Soldier and the Avengers, like, you have such a high bar to live up to. It's unbelievable. And I personally think they did as good of a job as they could, and X-Men Apocalypse is a good movie. I thoroughly like it, and I thoroughly think you should go see it. If you haven't seen the movie yet, definitely see it in theaters. It's an incredible experience, and it's a huge movie. Like, if you're gonna see a movie in theaters, this is one of those movies that you gotta see, right? Like, I mean, if you're only gonna see one movie this year, save your money, go to Rogue One, because it's fucking Star Wars. But my God, if you are considering it, hopefully this will push you over to going and seeing this movie, because like I said, the good far outweighs the bad. And it is like, it's my number 4 best X-Men movie that we've had, including the Deadpool movie, which, like I said before, is one of my favorite movies of all time. If you take out anything, like if you go just straight X-Men movies, it's my number 3 fucking movie. So hopefully that convinces you. If you haven't seen it, check that shit out, because it's really good. And then I want to talk just a little bit quickly before I go about, I told you I would give you a little review this week, or on this episode. Last episode I told you that I had started How Star Wars Conquered the Universe. I finished it, and my God, is it an interesting book. If you have, it goes into the entire history of Star Wars and a little bit more into George Lucas's directorial and even just his personal life history. And it's so interesting, and it makes me want to see a movie about George Lucas's life. And it would also be about Star Wars as well, right? Like, so overall, it would be an incredibly interesting movie, because, like I said, this book is so incredible. It's so incredible. You learn so much about not only just George Lucas and Star Wars, but also a little bit insight into Indiana Jones, and even like they mention Alien, and like there's so much stuff in the movie industry that you learn about through this book. It's so incredible. And if you are if you're a movie nerd like I am, read this book, because it tells you so much insight into not only just how George Lucas is and how he made the movies, but how he is as a director and how he is as a person, and kind of the thoughts behind that went into the Star Wars movies and some of the other stuff that has happened. And like you get a little bit of insight into the deals. Like, did George Lucas get all of the toy rights? Basically, Fox screwed themselves over by saying George Lucas, as long as he starts making them soon enough, gets full rights to the sequels. That's why the only movie that Fox actually owns the rights to is Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope, which I don't like calling it that. To me, it's just Star Wars. But that's the only movie that they actually own the rights to at all. So yeah, overall, this is an incredibly interesting read / listen. I listened to it on Audible. Again, not a sponsor. Check this book out. If you care at all about Star Wars movies, George Lucas, any of that, check it out. It's such an interesting read. I highly recommend it. But that's going to be it for me on this episode of the What Are We Talking About podcast. Let me know your guys' thoughts on any of the subjects I talked about today. Have you read this book? Have you watched X-Men Apocalypse? Let me know your rating for the top X-Men movies. I want to know. I'm curious. But yeah, so you can tweet at me at Winter Trooper, at What We Talking, email whatwetalkingabouttoday@gmail.com. And, you know, that's it. Until next time, never stop evolving. Peace.